side. There we go. There, I hit start.
Corey, are you good to do your video? Yeah. Sorry, guys, I screwed that up.
No problem.
All right, we are live.
Good morning, good afternoon, everybody. We'll take just a few moments here, let everybody log in, and then we'll get rolling with the webinar. All right, welcome to today's webinar, folks. Super excited to have Corey Frank, the CEO and founder of Branch 49, which is headquartered down here in Phoenix, Arizona, join us. And we're going to talk about how to set the table for market dominance in 2023. How do we create a world-class outbound motion and strategy that's going to let you take control of that pipeline and create repeatable, predictable revenue. So Corey, welcome. And thank you so much for joining us today. I appreciate having you on.
Oh, are we live? Oh, hey, great. Yes, fantastic. Good to be here, Shawn. We appreciate certainly everything that Quantum has done as thought leaders in the revenue space and the connect and sell HubSpot space. So great to be on with you.
Yeah, absolutely. One second here, working on the slide. Here we go. All right, so just a little bit about Quantum Business Solutions. If you're not familiar with us yet, we specialize in helping organizations create their own sales machine. And really our expertise lies in go-to-market motions, which is nothing more than the strategic and systematic alignment of the 5 areas of the quantum growth model, which are target, attract, nurture, convert, and wow. Really, it breaks down to how does your data, marketing, sales development, sales, and then client success all interact to give a seamless process and a flywheel that can go around faster and faster. If at any point during today's webinar, you decide, hey, I'd like to have a meeting with either Shawn or Corey, feel free to go ahead and scan the QR code and you'll be able to book a meeting right on the link. And then from there, we'll be able to have a one-on-one chat with you. So next, before we kind of pop in with Corey, just to lay the groundwork here, this is what we would consider a mapped out end-to-end rev gen process. Everything from how does a prospect end up in your ecosystem? So is it third-party data? Organizations like ZoomInfo provide that. Paid ads, trigger events, organic social referrals, and several other ways that folks come in. As they come in and a target's been identified, what do you need to do as an organization? And then through the marketing concept of awareness and consideration, we start to work into where really Corey is the expert, and that is sales development. So SDRs, BDRs, and inside sales. And then we'll talk about how do you take those opportunities and fluidly move them through the pipeline, ultimately down to solution determination, and create a customer that you can have client success with. Any comments on that, Corey?
No, I mean, you make it sound so simple. So it's just being a button you push, and I get all this magic pixie dust that makes my market come to me. I leave little lobster traps and honey pots that you lay out there, and the phone starts to ring, right? Is that how it goes? That I think that we're talking about today, right?
Yeah, absolutely. And Chuck let me know that we were sharing the presenter page. So hopefully we got that handled now. All right, so Corey, before we get rolling here, I'd love to have you just step in for a moment, introduce yourself. How did you get where you're at today? And what made you think of this concept of market dominance?
Well, you know, for those that know me, I've said this many times, I haven't had an original thought since about 1998. So most of what I spew and what we'll chat about today is garnered from me shining the shoes of the experts who've come before us. And we're talking certainly about the folks like Chris Beal, the CEO of Connect and Sell, and Oren Klaff from Intersection Capital and Pitch Anything, but also some of the masters in our space like Zig Ziglar and Brian Tracy and Tony Robbins and Art Subcheck, all those folks that have helped lay the groundwork for how to execute on market dominance. I think market dominance as a whole is right. Is if you're going to enter into business today, you want to dominate your market. Too often, folks just want a participation trophy, I think, right, Shawn, as we see this in businesses. I'm just happy to make it another year. I'm just happy to make it this quarter, happy to be profitable in the teens, as opposed to, it's a zero-sum game. And so how I got into it is I got myself into starting businesses and grew these businesses. And we got lucky. We took a couple of them public from private equity, a lot of venture funding. And over time, what we saw was the most impactful way to go to market was with an inside sales team. We had field teams and channel teams and things of that nature, but pound for pound, it was the inside sales team and that model combined with good marketing data that helped us dominate. And learning from the folks like Chris Beal and the Connect and Sell team is really what helped us get there. So
awesome. Real quickly, could you just share a little bit about being the entrepreneur in residence at GCU down in Phoenix, Arizona, and how you really began to come up with the concept of Branch 49 and how it happened?
So my partner in this business, Kevin Youngblood, and I, the gentleman who we're here at Grand Canyon University in Phoenix, Arizona. For those that don't know, on the west side of Phoenix, it's the largest Christian university in the world, 114,000 plus students. 12 years ago, they had about 800. So it's grown very quickly. And in the university, President Mueller, the president of the university, one of the tenets that he likes to promote is that certificate, that diploma means something in the world. And if we can graduate these kids, these students with an eye on entrepreneurship, that would probably be of help, no matter what profession you're in, whether it be nursing or teaching or biomedical engineering. You need that bent on being an entrepreneur and how to sell and how to market yourself, how to communicate, how to write clearly, how to communicate a new idea. And so here we have the Center for Innovation and Entrepreneurship. There's 35 different companies in this space here. And what we found from talking with a lot of them is most of them struggled with how to go to market. They thought, well, I guess I just got to raise some money. I think then that happens. I do SEO campaigns, SEM campaigns, LinkedIn campaigns, and then the market comes in. And it wasn't until one of my partners had said, well, has anybody actually thought about talking to a stranger? That kind of light bulb went off like, oh, holy crap, I guess I got to pick up the phone. Here, I got one of these things here, the old antique version of it, to actually reach my market. And so we said, I tell you what, let's create an accelerator here on campus and get things going. And then lo and behold, very, very quickly, outside of these walls, 3+ years later and 170 plus clients later, we deal with and we work with some of the largest cybersecurity companies on earth. We're blessed to work alongside some of the largest UCaaS, CCaaS companies on the planet. And so we've, along with some of the partners that are also your partners, Shawn, especially the folks at Connect and Sell, and Ryan Reisert at Phone Ready Leads, Oren Clef at Pitch Anything, Brad Ferguson at Sandler Sales. We've put together this great program that we call a finishing school for CEOs. Is that folks that come into our organization learn how to sell, and companies that come and work with us learn how to dominate their market.
Yeah, I absolutely love that, the finishing school for CEOs. So here's what I think people really came to get into, right? What is the meat and potatoes of how to create that outbound motion? Many organizations that we talk about are spending a lot of time and energy trying to create an outbound team that can go out and set appointments for their B2B sales reps or the direct sales reps, and they seem to struggle with it. So could you just lay out some of the pillars or the formula for how to do this?
Yeah, sure. And I, again, I didn't invent this. I'm a practitioner of this trade craft. But it is very simple. It's not easy, but it's very simple. Chris and I have a podcast called Market Dominance Guys, where we have a couple hundred episodes, I think with 8-9 listeners or whatever we have at last count, that have tolerated and listened to this type of content about how to dominate your market for the last 3+ years. But even before we talk about what the formula is, the actual concept of market dominance is a concept that if you dominate your market, you have an advantage. You have a policy that grants you, in essence, immortality for the lifetime of that market as you participate in that market. And that gives you the freedom to execute, the freedom to, that freedom to execute allows you to dominate another market. And you have other ways to do it. You can buy companies, you can invest in other companies, but generally from a high level, it comes down to math, which we're going to talk about in a second. But it's, if I have an idea to dominate a market, if I enter in a market, an e-commerce space, a UCaaS space, a cybersecurity space, first thing I say is, who's going to want to buy this stuff? So I got to make a list, and I curate that list. And then what I have to do is I say, what message would those folks respond to? And we create a face melter type screenplay, not a script, but a screenplay. And then the next area of the formula is we have to talk to people. We have to have conversations with folks. With the speed of conversations versus the speed or lack of speed in email and other digital, you'll see when we talk about this in a minute, where you just can't compete with the power of a human conversation. And then, of course, you have to follow up. And if you don't follow up, that's where the bleeding occurs. And we'll talk about it a little bit later.
Absolutely. So let's talk about number one, the first leg of the market dominance table. I know that you love to present on this and speak on this. So tell us about the math of sales.
Sure. The math of sales, and there's a lot of calculators out there to determine one. I'm a big fan of one that Chet Holmes created, and folks like Jerry Hill and Ryan Reisert have perfected. And that's, once you understand your size of your total addressable market, in any given TAM, what we found, Shawn, is that there's only about 8%, 1 in 12, in your particular market that is going to be in market and potentially an ideal prospect buyer for your product at any given quarter. So let's say you have 1,000 folks in your market. There's only going to be 1 in 12 that are going to be ready to take a meeting and potentially buy your product in that particular quarter. Why is that? Because the buy cycle of most folks with an LTV, a lifetime value of 3 years, is once every 3 years. Think when you buy a microwave, when you buy a car, maybe when you buy a ERP or CRM system, a phone system, it's generally once every 3 years. So 1 quarter out of 12 quarters is 8.3%. So even though my market may be, hey, I got 10,000 people in my TAM, I have to understand that it's not 10,000 people I'm going after. I'm really only actively trying to find that 8% of the market that is ready to buy right now.
I love that.
So-
That goes so well with when you look at that Rev Gen map that we had up earlier in the presentation here, is we talk about throwing a lot out into the marketplace and finding the signals. So we see there's a lot of misalignment between the data, the marketing, the development, and the sales and the client success. And so let me give you a couple of examples and why I like what you're talking about there so well. Is I'll go into organizations and oftentimes they don't have that date marked down if they ever did figure out what it was in a previous conversation. And if it is, it's in the notes, which is lacking the structural data to actually help them segment the marketing and put them back in front of the right person at the right time down the road. There's nothing worse than stepping into an opportunity and they just bought what you sell from someone else and you missed it. Secondly is, how do we then, based on that call outcome, you figured out you're not in that 1/12 of the time. How do we nurture that prospect through so that when the time comes and there is that opportunity, you're top of mind? Flip side, how do we take behavioral engagements from the marketing side of the business and feed it so that that SDR has the most likelihood of contacting the prospect at the right moment, right time, right message? And so I love what you guys do with the outbound and the math, the sales. And when you surround it with great data, great AI insights, and have data sales and marketing going back and forth, it's really incredible what's possible. In the extra, it's a math term here, but the extra sales velocity that can be gained. Is that kind of what your thought process is as well?
Yeah. No, I like how you condense that. It really is let machines do what machines do well and let people do what people do well, right? And as you go to the next slide here, Shawn, right? It's like what you're saying is, in essence, we have two choices, right? It's the first choice. If I only have 8.3% of my market, the buy now and the open to it available, every quarter, then I have two choices. I can either wait until those folks are ready to talk to them, are ready to be talked to, and talk with them for the first time, or I can talk to them about once a quarter and catch them every quarter, which means they're going to trust more, they're going to open up more, I'm going to learn more, they're going to learn more about us, and then eventually reveal when they're thinking about making a change. So the former, which is to wait until I trip over someone who has the right problem at the right time, that's how a lot of organizations kind of operate their business today. And the problem is, until you really have a trust-based conversation with somebody, you don't know when the right time is for them. And so you need these extra weapons in the marketplace. And I know you're a big advocate of the technology. You've certainly taught me a lot of it and help our own organization kind of plumb the right technology with the right weapons to reveal some of these buyers in the marketplace, these riper prospects a little bit sooner than normal.
Yeah. And what's interesting is, so I've been a sales leader and a CEO pretty much my whole career, is I used to make the comment that if I hired a rep and brought him in and they didn't sell anything for 6 months, but they just captured the data on every account of who the organization was with for the competitive product, when the agreement was up, how valuable that'd be for the future, right? Because when we go back to trigger events, remember that was how people get your ecosystem. Acquisitions happen in the marketplace. People put up job postings for something that your organization could handle. And you could go on, but that's where that segmentation comes. The other thing that happens with triggers is, if you're providing content into the marketplace that's educational, which I know you do with the Market Dominance Guys podcast, that really puts you out there as the market leader. So when the moment finally comes, 14 months after that initial call, they think of you first because they've been following your stuff. And so I see too many organizations trying to take from the prospect relationship and not give back. And I saw a really awesome thing on LinkedIn yesterday, which is, in my relationship with this prospect, am I plus or minus? I need to bring more value to the interactions in what I bring for information, materials, concepts, templates, whatever it might be, depending on what I'm selling. Then I'm taking, which anytime I'm asking for business, asking for a meeting, etc., put that on the minus points. you need to be value positive, right? Because otherwise somebody's not gonna end up taking that meeting. And too many organizations, in my opinion, they find out it's not the right time, and then all they do is they keep going for another close in the next year, but those are all going to ding against them. Pretty soon the prospect won't pick up the phone. But if they're finding ways, just like I believe we are here today, to value to the marketplace, someone who maybe was a cold prospect who you haven't been able to get a hold of in a while might attend one of these, rebook a meeting, and now you have a new opportunity open back up because you're bringing value, right? You're trying your best to educate them and give them something that can help them for free, right? It doesn't need to always be behind gates and all these other things. And so that's my first thing. The second thing with the math of sales that I love is you've continued to bring up Connect and Sal, who's a partner of ours. That technology is amazing because I've heard Chris speak many times about the concept that salespeople or SDRs want to do really one thing, right? They want to be having a business conversation or building relationship. How do I get them in front of as many opportunities to do that thing as I possibly can? Well, leveraging good data, but then using a technology like Connect and Sell, where all you do is talk to the next decision maker that you had on your list or target, we'll say, every 2, 3, 4 minutes is an unbelievable ability to do that. The other thing is the residue that you can get from the data perspective and feed that back into your CRM when you're doing it at that speed is unbelievable, which helps you segment for later campaigns.
For sure, for sure. Yeah, it's a true force multiplier. And I know you're a big proponent of that, as I mentioned, and taught me a lot about how to reimagine it, right? Because I'm a phone bigot, right? I'm a tree hugger when it comes to the power of the conversation. And we believe, and I think we're going to talk about this a little bit later, that the force multiplier for digital is the phone. And for those folks that we're talking to today that are maybe more embraced on the pure digital side without the phone, right? The math doesn't necessarily support that a digital only strategy works. You do need folks to pick up the phone and have these trust-based conversations. And this is a chart. It's a reimagining of the Chet Holmes pyramid we saw on the previous slide, Shawn. So thanks for bringing this up. And this is when you look at that the Chet Holmes pyramid, and this comes from Jerry Hill over the legendary Jerry Hill, who's over the pond over in the UK. At Connect and Sell, but a very impressive thought leader over the last few years, is when is the right time to cold call when you look and you map it against the Chet Holmes market dominance pyramid. And as you see, the folks who are ready to buy now, the ripest fruit, that's more the Terminus, the account-based marketing programs, which are very effective. And, you know, certain cold calling, of course, could help there, but it may be a little late since those folks are already pretty far down, what you say, Shawn, the buyer's cycle, the buyer's journey. They've done the research, maybe they've done now we may be able to trip over them in a cold call and say, hey, the timing couldn't be better. Send me a quote, but they're probably just using that to round out their bid process. But the real meat of where the cold calling really gets its legs is certainly trying to penetrate the rest of your TAM, where the folks who aren't even thinking about it yet or don't even think that they're interested. And the residue and exhaust, Shawn, that you talking about is exactly the phrase that we use over here at Branch. Those signals returned are incredibly powerful to determine, is my ICP really my ICP? I think it is, but I may have to make some adjustments there. And is the TAM as big as I thought it is? Is my messaging that I'm using to augment my SEM and my LinkedIn and my content data, is that tied in to what's really resonating and converting from a cold call perspective? So that's why I like that concept of working together.
So let's help the folks out here just in case they don't know what TAM is, right? So could you just give a 30-second description of what TAM is?
Sure. If I'm a cybersecurity organization, or if I'm in a UCaaS, let's take a simple one, a communication system, a Nextiva, RingCentral, a Zoom, a Teams, any folks, when I try to make phone calls in my business, who is a good prospect for my telecom system? How big is the world of the folks that look like a duck, quack like a duck, drive like a duck in my world? So if I'm a UCaaS or CCaaS system, a telecom system, or if I'm a cybersecurity company, it's probably businesses from X range to Y range in X industry versus Y industry. And the total amount of those folks, by the way, this is just a guess. Anybody who says, hey, this is the TAM, right? You got to validate it with phone calls. You got to validate it with conversations. But any given TAM is where you start, the total addressable market, and how I'm going to approach that market to determine if I can win in that market. And that's where the math comes in, is a formula that Chris and I like to talk about oftentimes in the math of market dominance, is trying to find your square root of your TAM. So if I have a TAM of 10,000 companies, for instance, that should, I think, want to buy my product, their lives can be bettered by buying my product. If I have it's 10,000, I need the square root of that TAM. So call it 100. I need to have 100 trust-based conversations as quickly as possible to determine if there's what's called product market fit. And that's a good statistical model to kind of use, because oftentimes us marketers and sales folks, we like to come up with new things and assume that if I build it, they're going to come.
Yeah,
But the
absolutely.
reality is, and I'm going to put a whole bunch of venture money and friends and family money and time and effort and employees and engineers behind this product that ultimately may not have a fit in the marketplace.
Yeah.
And the way that we say is, let's short circuit that a little bit, and let's actually get the square root of your TAM, the 100 conversations in a TAM of 10,000, and let's have trust-based conversations with those 100, whether they say, hey, jump in the lake, whether they say, I'm not interested, whether they say, hey, tell me more. But that residue, that exhaust that we speak of, Shawn, that's going to help me calibrate my messaging and certainly my go-to-market strategy.
I love it. One other term I'll throw in here, guys, is TAM, which is total addressable in market. So if your TAM was 10,000 and it's every 3 years, you might have 3,300 in market, which is total addressable in market. So that's your TAM. Don't want to get into acronyms too much, but just think about that, right? As you're doing strategic planning for 23, how are you going to dominate your TAM? And ultimately that's going to lead to dominating your entire TAM.
I've never heard that. So was that what you say is the top, that 8.3% that we talk about in the Chet Holmes? Is that a fancier way of saying that TAM, total addressable in market?
Absolutely.
Like
so if you look at 23 on strategic planning, and you're the expert in this a little more than me, but we're going to have 4 quarters next year, right? So that'd be a third. So if you had 10,000 was your whole TAM, I need to figure out who my 33 are that are going to be in market in 2023. And I'm going to have the first quarter folks that are part of that 8.3%, but I need to be calling on the second, third, and fourth quarter folks, because there could be some nurturing that has to happen, right? Not everybody buys the first time they talk to us, and you don't know exactly what part of the quarter they're going to buy in. You don't want to be too late to the party. So really, I think you've spoke of this before, but you want to show up, obviously, I'm assuming a couple of quarters before, and begin to build the rapport and the relationship. So by the time that decision comes, you're right there waiting.
Got it. I love that.
So the second one here, I love this one. The reports on the death of the phone have been greatly exaggerated. You guys have done millions and millions of calls. I know your partner on your podcast, Chris Beals, CEO of Connect and Sell, and Jonty and those guys over at Connect and Sell have done millions and millions of dials. Tell us what you mean by there's no death of the phone.
Well, we do prove it mathematically. So this isn't just, again, a tree hugging theme, which I can spew and wax poetically on a lot of my suppositions. This is data based. And if you scroll to the next slide there, I think I have a great quote that's a little bit old, about 18 months or old or so, pre-COVID. But this is from McKinsey. A couple of smart folks over at McKinsey looked at the 40,000 plus deals across many different industries. And they came to the conclusion that the old-fashioned telephone was incredibly still effective at getting people's initial attention. And that when they looked at the type of high performers in an organization, if you look at Price's Law, for instance, which says that the square root of the total number of folks that you have in your organization should represent about 50% of your deliverable number. getting into too much math here, right? But is that your top performers generally still embrace the phone, or they should, as they do in most organizations, more so than the lower performers, who simply send emails or they send the LinkedIn. And at the end of the day, they're going to come to, I'm going to come to you, my boss, Shawn. I'm going to say, hey, boss, I had a great day. I sent out 122 emails and I sent out 18 LinkedIn connections. High five. Well, how many people, humans, did you actually talk to? And that's why we believe in the power of the phone. And it comes to math, really, when we're going to talk about trust in a little bit. It's that a phone conversation cannot compete with a simple digital email conversation. And it's just the math. Chris and I like to talk about what I'm speaking right now, probably a little bit faster, but I'm at about 20,000 bits of information a second. And the moment we begin to trust somebody, generally is about 600,000 bits of total information that is exchanged. Just a math game of bits of information that are going back and forth. And a general email is scanned in a fraction of a second. Maybe it's a pretty sexy subject line. Maybe it's good copy that draws you in, a good, good font that's out of the ordinary. But still, it's going to be about 20 to 40, 50,000 bits of information in an email that's scanned in 3 seconds versus what we can deliver. Certainly with guys who speak very quickly like you and I, we're delivering, a lot of bits of information. So you just can't compete with the trust factor from a conversation first strategy versus a digital first.
So with that being said, okay, you've got me sold. I'm going to do some calling. I'm going to take control. How do I actually structure this call to have the best opportunity to be successful?
Mm-hmm. Well, what we do need to understand is that good, certainly as I say here, right, the great cold calling has a structure, and that structure is really built into the first 7 seconds. Is how do you establish trust?
Yeah,
and we have this ancient channel that is built directly into our brain that produces emotion. And it's the source of all of our decisions, including the involuntary decision to trust a stranger. And so 7 seconds of a human voice is about 140 different characters, right? You think about it. And so we have to figure out how to automatically personalize, because we're both humans, right way. Hopefully the person on the other line is a human. And we have to get beyond the traditional textual artifacts amongst the sea of other textual artifacts that we're dazzled by, that come digitally, LinkedIn and texts and things of that nature. So 7 seconds is all we need to build that initial trust. And as far as what we can tell, and certainly the folks at Connect and Sell are better experts than I am. They do 30 million phone calls a year. I think we do a meager, million phone calls a month, which is still a lot. But what you say in those 7 seconds, Shawn, it's more than 90% of the game. And the rest is the tone. How deeply do you believe in the value of the meeting, the conversation you are having, no matter what the outcome is? So every cold call, almost every cold call, we track this. You probably track this with a lot of the systems you use, but every cold call is most every cold call is lost in those first 7 seconds.
Wow.
And the reason is that those first 7 seconds, the voice and the tone does not support the concepts that are written in the screenplay. It doesn't support the messaging. The idea and the flow of emotions needs to be supported by the screenplay. The tone is critical. I think I have it right here. So here we go. We got an old ancient screenplay from a classic movie, right? Not Casablanca, right? Star Wars here.
Yeah, that's awesome.
This is an actual screenplay. And we all know that there were, sorry, spoiler alert, right? There's no such thing as Darth Vader or C-3PO or R2-D2 or any of those folks. But for those 2 hours, we were led to believe that they were. The fantasy was real. And it's like when you see a movie, a bad superhero movie, and you see the strings holding Spider-Man up or the superhero up, and you're like, I see the strings. It's like the illusion is all of a sudden lost. And Marvel is so powerful now because the technology of CGI has finally caught up to your brain to say, what, that actually could happen. That looked real. How do they do that?
Yeah.
And if your tone doesn't complement the messaging, that's why the delivery of the rep and the performance of the rep is so important. And why marketing can't live in a vacuum by just doing the messaging without listening to the ballistic nature of the conversation between the prospect and the rep who's delivering it.
That's so important. I think too, what's really interesting here is two things come to mind when you speak of this. And so you've really mentored me on one piece, which is this concept of the picker upper. So you've kind of shared, and I've become a believer that 27 to 42% of all of the people that you want to get a hold of are statistically going to pick up the phone, right? And so there's a couple things that come to mind here, which is you don't get a lot of chances at this thing sometimes. You've got to take advantage of that first 7 seconds because it might be the only 7 seconds you get. Now, we could have a little bit of a healthy debate on this, you being a cold caller, but part of the reason we talk about the nurturing around the call and the calling around the nurturing is because if they've seen you 8 times in an email recently and they've downloaded 2 guides and we'll talk about, status here in a moment, but that little bit could potentially give you that little bit of trust you need to get the door to open up and begin that conversation. On the flip side, that call coming in and they didn't know who you were and maybe you don't quite get that meeting, sets it up perfectly for you to market to them based on the call disposition or the outcome of that call, and then follow up in 90 days. And now they do know who you are and there's a higher level of trust. So I've been really fascinated with that concept. In the nature of time, I want to talk about status, which I think is what you're kind of getting into here.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Yeah, this comes from Oren Clef from Pitch Anything, who's over at Intersection Capital, who's another great partner of ours and good mentor of mine for years. Is that you can in Pitch Anything we talk about this, and there's this concept of the croc brain, and the croc brain, the midbrain, and then the frontal brain, and that when we get new information that comes to us, a TikTok, a billboard, a new acquaintance, whatever it is, we generally are attracted to randomness and novelty and something new and refreshing. And if we're doing a cold call and we don't incorporate that, we are diluting our status before we even know it. And so we need to have this randomness and this serendipitous social connection that is sparked to develop and engender this level of curiosity in the prospect. And we're going to talk a little bit about what's the mindset of somebody who picks up a cold call in a second. But status is important. You can't sell without status. And if what we see this a lot from coaching a lot of our clients is they'll start off the call, whether it be a discovery call or a scoping call, with thank you so much, Shawn, for your time. I know how busy your team is, and I know how much you guys really had to jump through some hoops to get this to this point. I really appreciate everything procurement has done. And even though they beat me up on the price and the contracting, I really appreciate being here today because I know you have a lot of choices. What do you systematically you are diminishing your status. And the other things here too is in the Pitch Anything methodology, which we teach and we advocate, is you need a couple of things. Is to be aware of that people are they attracted to things that move away from them. They want to be in a position where there has an element of tension. People want what they don't have, people chase what moves away from them, and people only place value in general on things that are difficult to obtain. And if you make it too easy for them, if it's too silky smooth, if you're too over the top enthusiastic and accommodating, an agreeable person, even in a cold call, meaning there's no tension, generally you're going to diminish your status, and you're probably not going to be respected enough from a trust perspective that this is someone I want to do business with to help me solve my problem.
It's an amazing thought that I don't think most of us have had when we were in those calls, right? So I love that. Let's talk a little bit about the mindset stages of a cold prospect.
Yeah. This is something that's very interesting. We talked about how the cold call is lost in the first 7 seconds. It's understanding the mindset of most folks when they pick up the phone. I think about like Ryan Reisert has been the master and kind of the real thought leader in the space about picker-uppers. And he believes, and I'm now a firm disciple on this, that there are certain dominant channels, personas that we have that we're more inclined to use versus others. Meaning, some folks are more predispositioned to pick up the phone, even if it says, like the call that just came in a minute ago, spam. I'm curious. I'm a picker-upper. I want to hear other pitches. But other folks say, I'd never pick up the phone if I didn't recognize the number. You even have the Google subscriber where you have to put in your secret number, and they'll only pass through to the recipient if you're in their phone list. You have folks who respond to LinkedIn but not to phone. You have folks who don't respond to LinkedIn or phone, but they'll respond to email. You have folks who prefer text. So you have these dominant personas that were more inclined to others. And so knowing those will help create a list, which we'll talk about a little bit later. But the natural state of everybody who picks up the phone, oh, I thought it was my daughter's school calling. I thought it was my Uber Eats order at the front of the office. We've all gotten that when we picked up the phone and it's a salesperson, whether it's a B2C play or a B2B play, is their focus is, their mindset is more of fear. And because you're the invisible stranger. And we're wired, as we talk about, Oren talks about this, Sapiens is another great book that talks about this, Chris Beall talks about this, is that strangers were bad in our primordial DNA here, because you're a stranger, you look different. You didn't have a bone in your nose, you had a bone in your hair. You didn't paint your face with blue stripes up and down vertically, you painted them horizontally. You lived down the river, and down the river was bad. My village here was special and different and familiar. So we're inclined that strangers are bad, and I have a sense of fear. So that 7 seconds has to take that fear to trust as quickly as possible. And how do you do that? You have to recognize that you are the problem. And this is why tone comes in so importantly. Shawn, hi, this is Corey. Listen, I know I'm an interruption. I've just called myself out. I know I'm an interruption. I know I'm the source you appear. Wondering if I can get 27 seconds, tell you why I called, and then I'll let you get back to the salt mines. So there's a pending end to this pain that I inadvertently stumbled into, which is picking up this call of the stranger. So by doing that with the right tone, I'm going to get from fear to trust, trust to curiosity. And then the curiosity to commitment is where the screenplay comes in, where the face melter has to come in to have something that has intrigue in it, that has novelness in it, that has randomness in it, that has a little bit of serendipity in it. And by doing that, you're going to engender this curiosity, and you're going to raise your status. And people want what they can't have. People chase what moves away from them, and they only place value on that which is difficult to obtain. And if you write your screenplay the right way, you're going to move through all these elements in about 3 to 5 minutes of a cold call.
I love it. That's awesome. All right, so build machines, not statues. Let's just speak a little bit on this. I want to be cognizant so we can give the guests some time to ask questions here, maybe in about 7 minutes. So build machines, not statues. Let's kind of frame this one up.
So this comes from Robert Vera, who runs the Innovation Center here, Center for Entrepreneurship. We see a lot of companies, certainly working with Oren at Intersection Capital for a number of years. Oren, Shawn, you've seen this in consulting with a lot of organizations, is that the challenge for a lot of organizations is why did we start as an entrepreneur? We probably were running away from something. Maybe we were running to something. Maybe we didn't want a boss anymore. Maybe we wanted more freedom. But generally, when you get to the element of why did I start this business? And as this business has grown, maybe it's 3, 4, 5, 10 years in, and you're doing 10, 25, 50 plus $1 million, maybe a little bit more. You realize, wow, do I have a real system in place, Or do I have a series of kind of coincidental, accidental salespeople in place? The call that I had right before this seminar today was with an organization about $75 million. My colleague and I were on the call, and they have, I don't know, about 120 or so sales folks. And I asked them a very simple question. Of those 120 sales folks, when you look at Price's Law, which is taking the square root of your total team and then tallying up the total rev that they bring in divided by the rev for the entire company, that's generally going to be about 50-55%. Okay. If that's the case, did those 5, 6 reps, 10 reps, whatever the case is, did they have a sales methodology that they follow? Or is it pretty much, let the big dogs eat? Why do I want to get in their way? They know the domain expertise, let them go. And the answer, typically, you probably get this a lot, Shawn, is no, we don't really have a sales methodology. We just kind of let the big dogs eat. Well, they've grown so quickly in spite of the fact that they didn't really have a structure. So too often we try to build these statues, try the best culture. We have a foosball table or the best time off policy or this or that and the other thing. And you realize that it's the math of knowing dial to connect to conversation conversion rate, close rate, all these metrics, all this residue and exhaust that you're so good at, and you talked about, Shawn, that really needs to go together to predictably accelerate and build your business for a sustainable system. And too often we're measuring nothing. And those that do measure something, we're measuring the wrong thing. And that's why I like kind of this amalgam, this cocktail of all the best of breed companies that you deal with so often, Shawn, which is how we met from being attracted to your systems over at Quantum, to say, wow, you really helped do the math for me, to help point me in the right direction of where I should be focusing my time, and help me build this machine versus a statue.
Well, one of the examples I give is if you do 1,000 cold calls and I do 1,000 cold calls in person, over the phone, however it happens, we close at the same rate. We set meetings at the same rate. The deal sizes are the exact same, but my connect rate is 5% and yours is 10. You're going to get twice as many sales as I am as far as revenue. The leader is going to come in. I could even actually have a little better ratios after the connect rate, right? The meeting set and the close and the deal size fall behind you, but I'm the one getting the talk at the end of the month. And it might be something as simple as I wasn't calling mobile phones, I was calling landlines, or some other reason I wasn't connecting the same rate. But connect rate is one thing I found that very few B2B organizations actually track. And what I call a connection is I talk to the person that I intended to call, right? So it's not I got the front desk person to pick up. It's if I was calling for Corey, I got Corey. People aren't tracking that. And so a big thing that we talk about is KPIs, which usually what people are tracking for KPIs is 2 things. They're tracking, 1, activity, right? And they're tracking deals closed. And in deals, maybe like the pipeline, but the pipeline's kind of phony because people are keeping things in the pipeline forever and moving deals month to month. And is it a real deal? And is it really going to be worth that? So it's hard, right? And then you talk to people and they say they're 50% closers, but I don't think they're factoring in all the things that fall off the wagon along the way. Because I know very few people that when it really comes down to it are closing 50% of all the opportunities. They're closing 50% of the opportunities that said would probably do business with them. Maybe they got a verbal, they got one guy, they put a really good proposal in front of them, and then they got 2 to sign, and the verbal and the other guy didn't do it. So they call it 50%. But what about everything that happened before that, right? The other thing is 10 meetings on $100,000 opportunity each is $1 million of opportunity. 10 meetings on $10,000 of opportunity each is $100,000. 10 meetings at $100,000 in general, that's going to take a year to close is different than the $1 million that might take 90 days to close. And people aren't looking at everything equally. And so when they ask the question, well, what's different? I've done outbound before, it didn't work or whatever it is. I always ask them, well, what did you do for this? Was the data talking? So like when the people who attend the webinar today, those will become leads, right? And we will go after those leads. How are you feeding the machine? And then how is the machine providing signals back to marketing? And then the backside of the business, how is operations feeding marketing and sales? And there's almost always a serious misalignment, and it costs organizations millions and millions of dollars. So totally agree with you on the systemization and knowing the math of sales, Because again, 10 meetings that are going to close this quarter that all 10 show up and they're $100,000 each. It's a lot different than 10 meetings, 6 show up. They're all worth $8,000 and they're going to happen over the next year. But yet as the leader, we might say, well, they both set 10 meetings. Well, which meetings and how did we determine systematically at a corporate level how we were going to do that? And what I love about Connect and Sell is the organization feeds that machine and the rep gets who they get, right? So you take a little bit of that decision making that needs to be made off of the rep and you determine it at the corporate level.
Yes. Yeah, all these shavings make the pile, right? And all the residue that falls off the table is stuff, certainly as I've learned and as you've helped even get us better at, Shawn, is what helps us calibrate and redirect better. And the other thing you're mentioning too is, I've tried outbound and not really gotten maybe the results I wanted. And pound for pound, we can send out a lot more digital and responses than phone calls. But the most of the value in calling is not in getting or not getting the meeting. Most of the value in cold calling, it's in the email, social, and the web interaction that's stimulated by these conversations. Because the problem that we see with a lot of go-to-market through digital only or digital heavy is also that everything that you do in digital is out in the open. Your search is transparent, right? Look at SpyFu. Google is busy selling your perfect competitor the exact search terms that will put you out of business. So is your LinkedIn and your Facebook and your Instagram and your TikTok, it's all out in the open. But when you're having a conversation with somebody in your ideal customer profile, in your TAM, it's one-on-one. And not only can you engender trust in a way that digital cannot, we already talked about that, it's private. Any information, residue, shavings that you get from those conversations is proprietary. And it's hard to imagine sustainably winning a fight by having no informational advantage whatsoever. So that's why I'm a little bit more of a phone bigot with digital wrapping around.
Yeah. Well, the last piece there was follow-up, which, we've spoke on many, many times, and we know that the money's in the follow-up, but I want to leave about 6 minutes here. Does anybody who is on the webinar have any questions for Corey or myself or both of us? Feel free to go ahead and drop them in the Q&A. Just want to make sure that they're all set up and everybody's able to put a question in.
One thing while we're waiting for if any questions come in is let's talk about the follow-up just a little, because that is where the proverbial rubber meets the road. You can do all these things well, as you know, Shawn, but if we don't follow up consistently, there's this phrase again, you can't out exercise your fork, right? It takes 3,500 calories to burn every pound of fat. These are the laws of thermodynamics. And the same kind of celestial mathematic and laws of physics exist in client acquisition and revenue follow-up. And so generally, when folks say my folks aren't talking to enough people, they keep filling the top of the funnel, right? You see it. We have all kinds of systems to do it. But there also is usually an abundance of activity, abundance of riches here. And so what we generally try to do is on the follow-up is knowing that is just inspiring our clients to say that a half-wounded prospect is going to be taken off that chessboard in 3 years if you're not careful about the regular follow-up every single quarter. So it's the false negatives in our world that hurt our market, not necessarily the false positives. So, but we have a little poll question here. Okay.
So 2 things. One, I threw up, are you guys looking for more top of funnel activity, or do you have it nailed down? I've got that poll up. While people are answering that, we've got a couple of great questions here, which is one comes from Mike Herwig. When calling on an already existing account, but was added to your territory to introduce yourself, what is the best way to get to the decision makers?
Hmm. Yeah, well, I still think if the serendipity works. So if there was a social connection, I'm not a big proponent of the personalization in emails. But I'm more of a believer in the trust-based conversation. But how as I just pick up the phone and I like to just have conversations with as many people as I can inside the cohort of that organization. And if I took over from an account from someone, I think, what do you think, Shawn? I mean, like I have so many reps at different lead companies and Salesforce, et cetera. They're always calling to introduce themselves to me when I don't even remember the name of the person who was running my account before. But yet, from a vanity perspective, sometimes I think we tend to say, hey, Shawn, just want to introduce myself. My name is Corey Frank. I'm a new account rep over here. Just want to see if you got 15 minutes on your calendar and, maybe carve out some time. And there's no value associated with that. Right?
I've got two things here. One, if your organization's keeping track of their data, you should know who the decision maker is, right? So call them directly on their mobile phone. And then to get them to take a little time with you, offer them something of value. Hey, I know you've been working with Corey in the past. He's actually moved into another role or moved on from the organization. I'd love to come visit with you and just take about 30 minutes to discuss this amazing piece of information that we've discovered that might help you. Would next Tuesday or Thursday work best? And have something of value for that prospect or for that current customer.
Yeah, it's got to be intrigue driven. There's got to be some curiosity. Chris has this great story that he talks about where if you're going to show up at you want an ideal prospect, this decision maker in question here, they're sitting at the bar at the end of the day, and you walk into the bar and you sit on their left hand side and you sit down and you ask, hey, how was your day? And if they say, you have no idea, let me tell you about my day. And whatever they say after that, that's generally the message that you want to contribute to. And so it's not about you. It's certainly about, everybody wants to feel fulfilled in their job and their business. And so if I can cater that message, not about, hey, I'm calling from branch 49 and here's what we do and here's how we do it, no one cares. Winter is coming in every business. What are the tectonic shifts that are happening in their space? That's what I want to talk about in a screenplay.
Yeah, absolutely. So question I would have for people, since there's opinions on this, have most of you guys on the phone leveraged SDRs currently or in the past? And while they're doing that, answering that question, we've got a second one here. This one's really good. How do you go about creating a target account process on a weekly basis to send to the SDRs for outreach? And what's your number one tip to set this up successfully? What's the process for list creation, essentially?
Okay, for list creation. Yeah, that first of all lists are about, think about search. When you say a good Italian restaurant to take my wife to for her anniversary, Italian restaurants in North Scottsdale. Oh, there's a search, there's a list that's going to come up. And we have to start treating list creation, if we're tracking the residue and the shavings and the exhaust, much in the same way. I don't necessarily choose the first one. I'm going to kind of look and scan. And so we let machines do what machines do and people do what people do. Here's a big mistake. I'm going to download a list from Zoom or Cognism or Apollo or any of the off-the-shelf services, and I'm going to sort them by territory, and then I'm going to import them into the system, and the reps will be off to the races, right, Shawn? And we don't put any human eyes on that list, meaning the reason why cold calling sucks for so many people is people are doing it wrong on the list creation. Because the searches on these off-the-shelf tools are a little rough. So we get cybersecurity. I want a security professional. Well, but sometimes you get physical security. You actually get the guard gates. You get the people, the security guards. Well, that's security because that's what it shows up in the Zoom list or the Apollo list or the Cognism list. So I have to create the list and then manually inspect and pull out everybody, which is a guess, that doesn't look, fit, drive, quack like the ducks that I want. And that it takes time, but you got to measure twice and cut once when you're doing list creation. And then you test it. And you test it to understand if it's the pitch or the pitcher. Is it the Indian or the arrow? Is it the message or the messenger? And if everybody goes off of the same screenplay, you'll be able to determine, because you have few elements in that system, is it the list? Is it my rep performance? Or is it my message? And if you just download a list in Zoom, you give it to the folks in the territory, they don't have a screenplay, you don't listen and coach consistently, you're just kind of stumbling around the dark and guessing.
Yeah, absolutely. So on the last poll question, 100% that voted, which was about a dozen there, had used SDRs in the past. So that's interesting. Obviously we're getting ready for 2023. So I threw up the last question here, and I just kind of want to discuss with one final point, and then we'll let everybody run on and go enjoy the day. But what are some of the top concerns for the participants, the folks that joined us today? Excited to see what those are. And then Corey, if you had just a 60-second piece of advice for 2023, what would it be?
I think it's we talked about this as a team on Monday in our world, is to focus on your trade craft. Too many of us, my last company that I had, as soon as you walked in, all 200 of the folks, the first thing they saw when they walked in every day was no tourists allowed. Is this concept where this is something in sales and marketing that we get to do, right? We live in the best country on earth here. So focusing on the trade craft. If you're a marketer, be the best damn marketer you can. If you're in leads creation, be the best bad lead creator. If you're in sales, your BDR, there is honor in the trade craft if you focus on the math as well as the subjective piece of this. And too often we dance around, go from one organization to another, to try to chase a base or try to chase equity or trying to chase a different marketplace. And you don't look in the mirror and realize that your situation in sales, in marketing, as an entrepreneur, as a CEO, as a CRO is only going to change when you start focusing on your craft as a thought leader. And
I love that.
There are so many, and Shawn, you're a humble guy, but I think you're one of the best and most progressive thought leaders out there. Josh Elquist, again, Josh Brown, Ryan Reiser, Jerry Hill, Chris Beal, Steve Richard, right? These are the giants in our industry today that certainly will help us fall in love with our craft a little bit more.
Awesome. Well, guys, it looks like for 2023, hiring and lead generation is the things that people are looking for most. So super excited for everyone to have a great year, and appreciate everyone popping on. Apologize, went maybe 4 minutes too long, but thank you so much for joining us today. And if you would like to book a meeting with Corey or I, again, feel free to go ahead and visit the Quantum website, book it there. Otherwise, we've got the QR code here in the background of my picture. Would love to chat with any of you. Thank you, and everybody have a blessed 2023.
Thanks, Shawn.